Great. Well, thank you. And again, yeah, thank you all the panelists for the nice presentations. Being a state DOT person and a highway and bridge guy for almost 40 years, this has been real educational for me, and I know I need a real 101 course. So let's look at, if everyone could turn on their video so that we can all see you, the panelists. And don't forget to unmute yourselves. We do have a few questions here. And Nate, this first one might be for you. Tony's asking about restoration, interest in restoring 400 miles of rail infrastructure owned by the state of Maine for establishing commuter passenger train services. It's quite a bit here. Let me see. These one question is looking for a discussion on the restoration of these tracks to a minimum of Class 4 rail service. That includes positive train control, crossing systems, and so on. Do you agree that state-owned railroads could serve as ideal locations for demonstration projects for the above? I don't know if you can see that question, Nate.
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer that real quick with maybe. It depends. I mean, all these things, as folks have talked about, and Dave just talked about, building and running a railroad's expensive. So when you go after money, whether it's freight or passenger, particularly passenger, building these high levels, it's expensive, and you gotta tell your funding partners that you're gonna maintain it and run it for a extended period of time. So before you jump into projects, you need to show. My presentation was kind of based on demand. We all like to build stuff and have big projects, but we got to show the demand and then have a commitment to run it and maintain it, and the costs related to that. So I would leave it at that. It'd be case by case on all our state-owned lines. When it's a freight or passenger project, we look for commitment from the various parties, as well as long-term need and the requirements for that.
Thank you, Nate. Emily has a question about composite ties. So Dr. Gow, this probably would be yours. Have you looked at, what's the impact of colder temperatures, 10 degrees Fahrenheit or colder? How do these composite ties perform in the extreme cold?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, we haven't actually tested a tie in the laboratory condition, cold weather condition, but I can share some experience that we have before at the TTC's Fast. So we run trains during the winter and the springtime. So we do have some time when we reach the temperature even below 0 degree. So it's extremely cold weather. So these ties, we didn't see these ties experience like a higher failure rate in the cold weather. So I think 10 degree for our experience should be okay, and the ties will still perform. And I think they also asked, these ties do contract due to cold weather. So there is some recommendation in the ARIMA manual right now to perform some gauge adjustments when they install below 40 degree or above 100 degree. So there are some guidelines in the ARIMA manual. And also, as Shuju mentioned, there are some composite ties with fiber reinforced technology. So that will definitely improve the coefficient of thermal expansion of the material. So it will reduce the thermal effect on composite ties.
Thank you. David, question for you. You mentioned autonomous inspection systems. Is there a need for any technology to streamline the maintenance and inspection workflows by workers in the field?
Yeah, I think so. We have a lot of good information that comes in from the different technology that we had mentioned. One of them is the autonomous geometry units. We have engineers that monitor that information as soon as it comes in. And that information is disseminated out to each of the subdivisions throughout our territory to immediately check on any defects, whether they're FRA or maintenance level defects. And right now we have a real paper process. I think I also mentioned, we're trying to move towards the electronic asset management system, which we're getting close on for both track and signal inspections. That's where we are.
Thank you, David. Reminder, folks, to post your questions to the Q&A. David, question for you, kind of in general, what types of things really bother you, keep you awake at night as far as the infrastructure goes? What are those real challenges that keep you awake?
Great question. So I think I mentioned it in my presentation. You think about the two things that really affect the service of an operating railroad is, the track and the signal system are kind of like first and foremost, followed by the power systems. And the track, for Metro North, really focus in on the older rail. We put in a new initiative to have a rail gang replace more rail throughout our territory. And the thing that keeps us safe, or the railroad safe, is that a continuous search for rail flaw with the ultrasonic inspections and the new technology that we use to make sure that we're getting any of the defects in the rail to prevent any service failures. So I'm happy. We welcome all that new technology. We've moved towards continuous rail testing, which helps us get through the territory faster in terms of getting rid of any defects in the rail throughout the system. So that's the thing that I'm focused on, and what keeps me up at night is looking forward to good technology to help us maintain a safe, reliable service.
Great. Thank you, David. I'm not seeing any additional questions. As a moderator, I'm going to exercise my right to ask dumb questions. So, Louisa, go ahead.
Thank you, Dale. I wanted to ask Nate about the extent of your coordination with Transport Canada. You mentioned that you had an east-west line, connecting at Canada, and wanted to know how that worked with your Canadian colleagues and counterparts.
Yeah, so we do have some limited interactions with them. Sad to say, it's usually around when there are problems or issues, mostly with Transport Canada.
Yeah.
Certainly the Lac-Méganic disaster was one of those, and we worked very closely with them for a period of time and still touch base on some of that work periodically. But on kind of day-to-day regular work, it's pretty limited. Even though, again, we work probably more with, we got Quebec on one side and New Brunswick on the other, and we work, more, I'd say, with the New Brunswick partners, and then the Quebec, as opposed to the larger, Transport Canada. It's more of the regional folks. But again, it's pretty limited. We probably should have more.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask my question. Shushu, first of all, it was a real fascinating presentation. I'm an old bridge engineer, so I like the technical stuff. One thing that is not clear to me is the whole dynamics of a derailment and what happens first. Do the spikes start to fail first, or does the derailment occur? Is the derailment is a result of some spikes that have cracked and failed? I mean, I don't know if you could comment on that, or maybe Dave or others might have a comment.
So I think in the past few years, there are some derailment accident happened, and there are actually FRA investigations. There are reports showing the derailment is caused by the broken spikes, because once you have the broken spike, the spike fails, then you lose the lateral and the longitudinal restraint, and then the rail gauge started to get widening. Then that's why the derailment happens. I'm sure there are some experts from VOPI. They can do further explanation, but yeah, that's how I understand those derailment.
Dale, I was going to point out that we have Brian Marquis here. He's the chief of the Structures and Dynamics division, who is an expert on derailment and its causes.
Mhm.
Brian, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if
Mhm.
you wanted to add anything.
Hi, sorry about that. Hope you can hear me.
Yep.
No, I think every accident is sort of a unique event. There is always this progressive failure of components. I think that was touched upon in some earlier discussions as well. And you do get to a point where things start to build up, and sometimes it can be a catastrophic failure. But other times it's a gradual failure that may lead to, say, a wide gauge that the wheels fall within and then tear apart the rest of the track structure, et cetera. So I think it's a mixed bag, as a short answer. I'm sure David would also have further thoughts on that as well. But in my opinion, it's generally all of the above. You sometimes get these slow progressive failures, and then in other cases you will get a sudden catastrophic failure of a component that will lead to a derailment.
Yeah,
Thank you, Brian.
I mean, chime in a little bit here, but yeah, Brian, I agree. It's usually some type of, a chain reaction of a component failure. Typical, if you have bad ties that lead to, not holding your lateral restraint, and then, that'll be a failure point. Not having enough anchors could be a failure point. Curve worn rail could lead to another failure point. So like you said, each one is a little bit unique.
Thank you. Mark asks, all rails will be replaced with 136 RE. Someone's going to have to educate me and perhaps others on what that is, but that's a question mark, or 3 question marks. Anyone care to comment on that?
I mean, I guess I could comment. It's a 136-pound rail. Is a typical rail section. It's one of the newer rail section. I know in my presentation we have many different rail sections, 119, 132, 140. We're moving towards that 136-pound as our standard section throughout our system. But that only currently comprises about 25% of our rail, it's the older sections have a 5.5-inch base. The 136 is a 6-inch base, and that's a very nice standard section that's kind of robust, and that we're using to replace all our older sections right now.
Thank you. And we are going to run out of time. I apologize to folks, the audience. I have about a minute left. Nadal is asking, is Metro North considering improvements that could speed up the service? Is there a speed goal in mind?
It's another great question. So we have spent the past several years kind of like slowing down the railroad to help us with a state of good repair. We implemented positive train control, which has, you all know, was implemented by the end of last year. That slowed down the railroad a little bit as well in terms of, enforcing, making sure that engineers are braking at the right times per the braking curves. That slowed us down. So yeah, we are now starting with all those different systems in place. We are looking towards, opportunities to speed up the railroad where we can, and use positive train control where we can to enforce the signal system. and not go, we have a block-based signal system approach, where we have certain cab signal downgrades that were put in for various reasons. One of them was an FRA regulation. So we are looking at areas now to improve travel trip times, you know, on all of our lines where we can.
Thank you. For those panelists and audience, if you want to stick around till say 10 past, I think we'll keep going. So for those of you that can continue to stay on, please do, and we'll go for another 8 or 9 minutes here anyway, and that's greatly appreciated. Dallin asks, what's the preference? Are we going with wood or concrete ties, and why? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Dale, I can take a shot. I mean, from Metro North's perspective, and I mentioned in my presentation as well, we're going with wood. It's kind of like I think of it as kind of the old reliable. I'm sure this is, you know, big argument, or could be a big argument. There's nothing wrong with concrete. They are 3 times heavier than a wood tie. If you put them in and you have good drainage, they will last significantly longer. They're stronger in terms of holding, you know, gauge restraint. We at Metro North, we have a lot of areas of poor drainage where we're running through cut areas and such, and we found that the concrete ties don't perform as well in poor drainage areas. So we've moved towards wood tie replacement, but sometime in the future, we will look towards other areas where we can put in concrete ties, because they have a very good benefit as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that question? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Nate, this one's for you. We see heavy, this is from Mario, we see heavy investment in other countries, Europe, Japan, China. What are your thoughts on the American public supporting developing railroad infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it varies throughout the country. I mean, one thing here, again, a lot of our system is in private hands. So, you know, in regard to a lot of the passenger service, you're a guest on a privately held freight railroad. And so there are a whole bunch of issues around, you know, Europe has a great system. A lot of it is owned by the you know, the countries that it's in. Probably our freight service is a little better than theirs, and their passenger service a little better than ours. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag, and just kind of how they've developed. The countries have developed and over the years, and the infrastructure and the ownership and things like that. So we have ongoing support here in Maine, as I talked about during my presentation, generally for rail, but rail is not the end all. It's a part of the system.
Thank you. Another one, Nate. Ongoing state action plan preparation work. Do you have any interesting insights on that?
So a couple of the plans, and I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to. We've got our crossing, state crossing plan. We're wrapping that up. That'll be done in December, early January for submission. And then we just kicked off our statewide rail plan with our consultant. We haven't started any outreach on that or anything yet. It's just literally we've had a kickoff meeting and are starting to gather data to really start that up. That'll be about a 1-year project. And so we'll be reaching out and holding meetings and doing all that work here in the next year or so.
Thank you. Dave, question for you. With the passage of the federal legislation, any thoughts on coordinating maintenance of way actions with a ramp up of projects and associated long-term outages?
Yeah, we're obviously excited about the passage of the infrastructure bill, and we're looking to we have several major projects that we're looking to put forward here at Metro North. One of them is Penn Station access. Another one is replacement of the Park Avenue viaduct. replacement of our Grand Central Terminal train shed infrastructure. So we have, plenty of kind of shovel-ready projects ready to go that can use this funding towards the state of good repair and capital improvements.
Thank you, Dave. Nate, question for you. What kind of repairs do we predominantly have to boost bridges to the 280,000 pound requirement? What type of work are we typically doing?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's a little bit of everything. We on our project up north, we had 5 different contracts, and each contract focused on kind of different things. One was focused on a very large truss bridge, fracture critical type bridge. And so that was one contract by itself. And then there's one contract focused on steel bridges. They're generally shorter bridges, and it's adding plates or beefing up just some of the support structures so that they can hold the new weight, or where we've had degradation of some of the steel. Although the steel is, a lot of it is held up amazingly well. Where we see a lot of degradation is over salt water on our bridges, but the inland bridges really, even though they're 100 years old, have really, the strength has held up very well. Another contract we're doing right now is more substructure, again, from concrete work, whether it be just chipping back to good concrete and reinforcing or replacing substructure elements, things like that. The other 2 are more culvert related and replacing old, we call them a bridge because of their length, but they're really just a big culvert. So it varies. It's bridge by bridge, and some of them end up being fine. And so, again, we're finding a variety of things, but generally it's just beefing up steel plates or truss structures, things like that, or adding additional bracing.
I guess this question could be for everyone. Again, the federal legislation, the new infrastructure plan, how is it going to impact us? Nate, you want to go first, and we can see who else might want to chime in?
Well, I'm working my way through the 2,700 pages. It's been the question of the week right there, starting on Monday. We're analyzing that, figuring it out. There's, in some places there's a lot of new money, in other places not so much. So we're kind of analyzing that. It's good news, right? It's good news for everybody, and we like to see the investment in infrastructure, and as a DOT across the board, it's good for us. So, but as far as individual impacts, and there are some new programs in there that the rules haven't even been written yet. So it's hard to tell how beneficial they'll be here, because what are the requirements or parameters to use that money? Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it certain levels of service, all those types of things. So as we get through that, and as they write the rules, we'll be able to know more. But my general comment is good news, and we'll see what the detailed impacts are as time goes on.
Great. Anyone else? I think we are gonna have to wrap up. Oh, there's one more question that just came in. Another question for Nate. When does Maine DOT anticipate issuing the RFP for transit potentiality analysis for extension of passenger service to Bangor?
I would say that will be early 22. So there are a bunch of requirements in that legislation, including some local match, and the local match is still being gathered. Once we receive that, we'll be working towards setting up with a consultant and the schedule for that work. But I would guess early 22.
Thank you. We are at 10 past the hour, and I think we'll wrap up the session. A special thank you to all the panelists for the presentations, for spending some time with us today. And a real big thank you to Volpe, Louisa, and Brian, and other folks there for actually helping us, make some connections and putting this session together. Louisa, appreciate your help with the moderating of this session. We'll be back at 1, and we'll have a keynote by Connecticut DOT Deputy Commissioner Mark Rolfe. So Louisa, do you have any final words of wisdom before we go to lunch?
I don't know if they're wisdom, but it was a pleasure working with you, our colleagues at Maine DOT and the University of Maine. Glad to have our team presenting here today to support the conference. It was really chock full of information, and thank you so much to the panelists for contributing.